Europe was once an idea born from ruins. After the most devastating war in human history, a simple but radical belief took hold: that nations, so deeply intertwined economically, would never again turn their guns on one another. That belief became the European Union. Yet today, that same union faces a growing rebellion from within. Borders are tightening, national flags are rising, Eurosceptic parties are winning elections, and millions of Europeans are asking a once unthinkable question: is the European Union still worth it? Is this a temporary crisis, or the beginning of the end of Europe's grand experiment? The European project didn't begin as a political empire. It began as a peace mechanism. In the aftermath of World War II, leaders in France, Germany, and beyond understood one thing clearly: Europe could not survive another cycle of nationalist rivalry. The solution was economic interdependence. Coal, steel, trade, industries once used to wage war would be shared instead. The logic was simple: countries that trade together don't fight each other. And for decades, it worked. The EU brought unprecedented stability. Borders opened under the Schengen Agreement. A single currency simplified trade. Living standards rose across much of the continent. For many, Europe became synonymous with peace, mobility, and prosperity. But there was always a trade-off. Membership required nations to surrender pieces of sovereignty over borders, budgets, laws, and even currencies. And while elites largely embraced this compromise, the public never fully internalized it. The EU functioned smoothly when times were good, but its foundations were never tested by crisis, until they were. The first major shock came with the global financial crisis. Southern Europe was plunged into austerity. Northern Europe grew resentful of bailouts. Trust between nations began to erode. Then came migration. The 2015 refugee crisis exposed how differently European societies viewed borders, identity, and responsibility. For some countries, solidarity was moral duty. For others, it felt like forced compliance. And then, Brexit. For the first time, a member state didn't just criticize the EU, it left. Brexit shattered the myth that European integration was irreversible. Since then, nationalist and far-right parties have surged across the continent, in France, Italy, Germany, the Netherlands, Hungary, Slovakia, and beyond. Their message is remarkably consistent. Brussels is too powerful. Immigration is out of control. National culture is under threat. Ordinary citizens are ignored. But here's the uncomfortable truth. These movements didn't appear out of nowhere. They are responding to real anxieties: economic stagnation, housing shortages, demographic change, and cultural uncertainty. The question isn't whether nationalism exists. The question is whether the EU knows how to respond without undermining itself. As nationalism rises, internal EU divisions are becoming harder to hide. One major battleground is economic policy. Wealthier states push for fiscal discipline. Indebted states want flexibility and shared responsibility. Then there's climate policy. Green transition plans are applauded in Western Europe, but viewed as economic threats by farmers, industrial workers, and Eastern member states. Agricultural protests erupt, energy prices spike, Brussels becomes an easy target. And perhaps the deepest divide of all is East versus West. Disputes over rule of law, judicial independence, media freedom, and relations with Russia have exposed a fundamental problem. The EU shares laws, but not always values. Some governments openly challenge Brussels while continuing to benefit from EU funds. Others fear that enforcing standards too aggressively will fracture the Union entirely. And hovering over all of this is a familiar accusation: Brussels bureaucracy. Is it a real problem, or a convenient scapegoat for leaders unwilling to take responsibility at home? In truth, it's both. The EU suffers from democratic distance, but national leaders often blame Brussels for decisions they themselves approved. While Europe argues internally, the world is changing rapidly. Russia's war in Ukraine has forced the EU into a historic moment. For the first time, the Union is acting as a geopolitical actor, imposing sanctions, funding defense, and redefining security policy. Yet unity remains fragile. Some countries prioritize deterrence, others fear escalation. Energy dependence complicates everything. At the same time, Europe is caught between superpowers. The United States expects loyalty. China offers trade but demands silence. And Europe must decide, is it a strategic actor or merely a market? Without a unified foreign policy, the EU struggles to project power. But pushing for deeper integration risks fueling the very nationalist backlash, threatening its survival.
It's a paradox with no easy solution. So where does this leave Europe? There are two broad paths forward. Scenario 1. Retreat and fragmentation. Borders harden. Economic protectionism returns. The EU survives, but hollowed out. Cooperation becomes transactional. Solidarity fades. Europe becomes weaker in a world that rewards scale and unity. Scenario 2. Adapt and evolve. Not blind federalism, but selective integration. Stronger coordination where it matters. Defense, energy, technology. More flexibility where it doesn't. More accountability. Less ideology, more pragmatism. This path requires honesty, admitting mistakes, listening to citizens, and accepting that unity doesn't mean uniformity. The European Union was never just about economics. It was about choosing cooperation over conflict. Today, that choice is being tested, not by foreign enemies, but by the daily decisions of its own members. The EU's future won't be decided in treaties or summits alone, but at ballot boxes, dinner tables, and public debates across the continent. The real question isn't whether Europe can survive nationalism. It's whether nationalism and cooperation can coexist in a world that grows more divided every day. What do you think? Is the EU reformable or already past the point of no return? Let me know in the comments.